You watch a new person enter your social circle and slowly rewrite the group rules. They use charm to isolate members and subtle criticism to lower everyone's collective social confidence. It is easy to resent this disruptive force from the safety of your private thoughts. Yet, you have likely played the quiet diplomat to keep your own social standing secure. The mind uses silence, a shield, when a dominant personality begins to take control. You will learn how groups surrender their power to the most aggressive survival instincts. We often define toxic behavior as a loud, obvious villainy that should be easy for any group to identify. However, the toxic patterns described in our title are highly adaptive survival strategies used to colonize social environments. Evolutionary psychology reveals that humans are wired to prioritize group harmony over the individual discomfort of a single member. Predatory social patterns exploit this biological urge for peace by introducing small, incremental boundary violations that go unchallenged. Labels like toxic describe a specific psychological mechanism of resource extraction rather than an inherent, unchangeable human identity. This pattern acts as a hidden psychological trap where the group slowly adapts to the most disruptive person. The human brain prefers the certainty of a dominant leader over the chaotic tension of an unresolved social conflict. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them, like a friend who suddenly demands loyalty. You see them start to check in on who else you are seeing or speaking with during the week. They are not being protective, but are beginning to map out the boundaries of their new social territory. By creating small divisions, they ensure that no two members can unite against their growing individual influence. The group grants them this space because the cost of an immediate confrontation feels too high to pay. This is a form of social conditioning where the most aggressive personality sets the new emotional temperature for everyone. Behavioral science suggests that groups develop a normalized deviance where harmful behavior is eventually excused as a personality quirk. The person is not just joining the group, but is fundamentally restructuring the hierarchy to serve their own safety. We mistake their high social energy for charisma, but it is often a frantic drive for total control. This is where the pattern becomes difficult to ignore in professional teams and tight-knit family units alike. We follow their lead because the brain views social exclusion as a threat to our primary survival needs. The individual who dominates the group essentially holds the social survival of every other member in their hands. They take over because they are the only ones willing to use social aggression as a primary tool. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them, like a coworker who starts rumors. They manage to make themselves the gatekeeper of information, deciding who is in and who is out. You find yourself laughing at their jokes just to stay on their good side for the day. The dominant individual has successfully traded the group as psychological safety for their own personal and professional security. This is not a moral failure, but a primal strategy to ensure they are never the one abandoned. The brain seeks to be near the source of power, even if that power is built on fear. We see this in family dynamics, when one person's mood dictates the entire holiday dinner for everyone. They are not just being difficult, but are exercising a sophisticated form of emotional and social leverage. By making their discomfort everyone's problem, they ensure they are the most important person in the room. What looks like a strong personality here quietly reshapes everything later as we explore the origin. The pattern is a survival response to an internal world that feels constantly threatened by the independence of others. Choosing awareness over avoidance means looking at why we trade our collective values for a temporary, false peace. Staying with uncomfortable psychological truth reveals the architecture of how social groups surrender to the most ruthless member. Join a space where unspoken patterns are examined honestly to see the cost of the dominant self. The blueprint for a dominant and controlling social style is often formed in a landscape of early emotional instability. A child who grows up in an unpredictable home learns that they must control their surroundings to feel safe. If their needs were only met through manipulation or emotional outbursts, the brain archives these tactics as vital tools. This early conditioning creates a neurological loop where the independence of others is perceived as a direct personal threat. Psychologist Erik Erikson emphasized that the failure to develop basic trust leads to a lifelong drive for total mastery. The mind decides that if it cannot trust the group to be fair, it must own the group instead. Evolutionary pressure favored those who could command the attention and the loyalty of the tribe through sheer force of will. The toxic takeover, the survival relic of an ancient world where the strongest personality dictated the distribution of food. Fear-based adaptation ensures that the individual views any loss of social control as a precursor to total personal annihilation. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them, like a parent who micromanaged every detail. You might remember how any attempt at your own autonomy was met with a display of cold, calculated guilt. Their mind was not being malicious, it was simply unable to survive the uncertainty of an uncontrolled child. They discovered that, by creating emotional chaos, they could force everyone around them into a state of permanent submission. The brain learns to use the vulnerability of others as a handle to steer the group toward its own safety. Social learning reinforces this when we see that the most demanding individuals often receive the most social accommodation. We observe how difficult children grow into adults who are given more space because people are afraid to trigger them. The mind internalizes the rule that being too much is more effective than being a quiet, contributing member. Childhood conditioning often links the child's sense of worth to their ability to outmaneuver the adults around them. If a person only felt significant when they were causing a stir, they will view peace as a form of invisibility. To prevent the catastrophe of being ignored, the ego learns to hijack the emotional atmosphere of every room it enters. The mind becomes a predator of attention, scanning every group for the weakest boundary it can successfully penetrate. Social pressure to get along is felt by the dominant person as an opportunity to push their own agenda. They believe they are simply the only ones brave enough to take charge of a weak and indecisive group. This origin story explains why some people feel an almost desperate need to divide friends and family members. Their internal map of the world is drawn with them at the center of a web of dependent relationships. Every healthy, independent connection between others is scanned as a threat to their centralized and absolute social power. What started as a child's defense against an unstable parent matures into a sophisticated method of social colonization. The origin of social takeover is often found in a deep-seated fear of ever being truly and totally alone. We build these controlling habits because we do not believe we are enough to be loved without a contract. The pattern is a survival mechanism for those who feel they must hold the group hostage to remain part of it. By looking at these roots, we see that the dominant personality is actually running from a deep, internal void. It is an attempt to create a social fortress where no one can ever leave or reject the self. This is where the behavior stops being an annoyance and becomes a mandatory requirement for the person's psychological survival. The mind is locked in a state where it must be the master to avoid feeling like the slave. Every act of rebellion from the group is a crisis for the ego, because freedom is a threat to control. Understanding this origin allows us to see the profound terror hidden behind the mask of the group leader. The internal drive to dominate manifests in social circles as a slow and deliberate erosion of collective agency. In friendship groups, this often looks like the person who subtly critiques a newcomer until the group rejects them. They use concern for the group's well-being as a mask for removing anyone who might challenge their central authority. While it feels like they are protecting the group, they are actually pruning it to ensure total loyalty. By dictating the social roster, they ensure that their version of the truth is the only one that remains. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them, like a friend who gatekeeps every interaction. They become the singular point of contact, ensuring that no two other friends meet without their explicit presence. They are not being social. They are preventing the formation of alliances that they cannot monitor or control. In romantic relationships, this social expression can take the form of triangulation, where the partner creates constant competition. One partner may mention an ex or a flirtatious coworker to keep you in a state of perpetual insecurity. They use your fear of loss to make you work harder for their approval while they remain comfortably distant. You find yourself competing for the attention of a person who is intentionally and strategically withholding it from you. Admitting that this dynamic is manufactured feels like a betrayal of the intense passion they have carefully simulated. Within families, the takeover pattern often plays out through the role of the emotional gatekeeper or the martyr. The person who wins, the one who convinces everyone else that they are the only ones holding the family together. They use their sacrifices as a heavy debt that every other family member is expected to pay back forever. This is a form of social engineering that uses obligation to bypass the need for genuine, mutual respect. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them, like a relative who stirs the pot. They share secrets between cousins or siblings, framing themselves as the only trustworthy confidant in the entire family. When the family eventually fights, this individual sits at the center, appearing to be the only peaceful mediator. The social expression of the hidden self is a game of creating the fire so they can sell the water. We often allow this to happen because the dominant person is highly skilled at identifying our private insecurities. The brain is wired to seek the approval of the most critical person in the room to stop the pain. We trade our social autonomy for the temporary safety of being on the right side of the aggressor. This creates a social environment where the group's values are replaced by the individual's whims and shifting moods. They harvest the peace of the group while contributing only a sense of impending and inevitable social conflict. In professional life, this leads to a hollowed-out team where the only people left are those who are compliant. The talented and independent thinkers leave, leaving the dominant person as the king of a very small hill. The toxic individual remains successful because they have effectively removed anyone capable of noticing their actual professional incompetence. By observing this in others, you begin to see how the takeover is actually a process of social isolation. It is a way of building a world where no one is allowed to be stronger than the person in charge. The social expression of the colonizing self is a cycle of taking space while convincing others they don't need it. We witness this when a leader takes all the credit for a team win but blames the culture for failure. Their presence is an anchor that prevents the group from drifting toward any reality they do not personally own. The answer to why they take over is that we are often too tired to fight for the truth. We follow their lead because we mistake their lack of empathy for a sign of cold, objective strength. The digital and corporate structures of the 21st century have become a massive incubator for the social predator to hide in plain sight. In smaller, ancient communities, a person who tried to divide the tribe was quickly identified and faced immediate social shunning or physical exile. Modern life, however, offers a level of scale and compartmentalization that allows the dominant drive to flourish without any immediate or lasting consequence. Our current professional and social systems are often designed to reward the individual who can most effectively manipulate the collective perception of the group. We live in a winner-take-all culture where the ability to dominate a conversation is increasingly viewed as a sign of true and visionary leadership. The digital world amplifies this by creating platforms where social aggression is rewarded with high engagement and an increase in perceived public authority. Social media algorithms are specifically engineered to favor voices that create division, as conflict generates more time spent on the platform by everyone. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them, like a friend who creates a digital inner circle on social apps. They use private groups to leak information about others, creating a digital hierarchy that mirrors the primitive social structures of the past. Their mind has been trained to value the digital submission of others over the tangible, honest connection of a healthy and equal friendship. This is a form of modern social engineering that quietly rewards narcissism while calling it personal branding or being a high-value individual. We are told that we must curate our circle, but this message is often used to justify the systematic exclusion of anyone who disagrees. In the modern workplace, the decline of long-term job security has forced individuals into a state of permanent and hyper-competitive social survival. Since the company may not protect your future, The brain decides that it must aggressively occupy the social center of the office. This creates a political psychology where people move through departments, dismantling the reputations of their peers to clear a path for their own ascent. Society denies the psychological cost of this behavior by labeling it as office politics or having a sharp competitive edge in professional journals. We celebrate the CEO who cleaned house, often ignoring the human wreckage left behind by their need for total and unquestioned personal loyalty. By the time the destructive nature of this social takeover is revealed, the individual has often already moved to a higher position of power. The modern environment acts as a megaphone for the most assertive voices, making it nearly impossible for the quiet, collaborative spirit to be heard. We see this in the way online communities are governed, where the loudest and most aggressive members eventually become the de facto leaders of the group. The hidden self thrives in this fragmented world because there are fewer long-term witnesses to hold it to any meaningful moral or social account. Modern life has taught us that being kind is often synonymous with being invisible or exploited by those who are more willing to take. Consequently, many people feel a quiet, desperate pressure to adopt these toxic traits unless to avoid being the one who is pushed out. We are witnessing the institutionalization of social dominance, where the takeover is the only metric of success that the modern world truly respects. The amplification of this pattern makes it harder for the empathetic person to feel like they have a stable place in the social future. We are building a social reality where the most successful among us are the ones who are the most skilled at quiet, social destruction. What feels like a personal choice to lead is actually a response to a landscape that no longer values the slow build of trust. The result is a culture of high-achieving individuals who rule over groups that are fundamentally broken and drained of any genuine human warmth. This is where the pattern becomes a systemic rot that we are all forced to participate in just to maintain our basic social relevance. Understanding this amplification shows that the takeover is often a hollow victory in a world that has forgotten how to live together. The most unsettling realization is that the group does not accidentally fall to a dominant personality, but often unconsciously chooses to surrender. You may now recognize the mechanics of the social predator, but knowing the strategy does not stop the feeling of being trapped by them. Recognizing the hidden self in a relative or a manager does not return the collective peace that was stolen from the group. The human brain is biologically compelled to avoid the high-stress adrenaline of social confrontation, which makes us forever vulnerable to the aggressive. We are left with the crushing awareness that the toxic individual is often the only one in the room playing the game to win. Most people first notice this pattern in someone close to them, but the deepest challenge is seeing your own passive complicity. We have all stood by in silence while a friend was unfairly mocked, fearing that speaking up would put us in the crosshairs. This drive to stay safe at the expense of our peers is a structural part of our shared survival architecture that we hate. The tension between being a person of integrity and being a person who survives the group is a knot that stays tight. There is no simple resolution to a world where the most disruptive person is granted the most space and the most grace. Awareness offers no relief. It only clarifies the price you pay for being the one who values the group more than power. You are now standing in a space of cold clarity, watching the theater of social dominance with a new, heavy understanding of it. The hidden self is a master of emotional exhaustion, convincing the group that fighting back is more painful than simply letting them lead. Reflect on the groups you have left and ask if you fled the people or the silence that allowed one person to rule. This clarity offers no sanctuary, only a sharper sense of the profound drain inherent in every group that has lost its internal balance. The cycle continues because we are terrified of the social vacuum that is created when a dominant, certain voice is finally removed. We are participants in a social game where the person who is most willing to be disliked is the one who controls everything. The closing of this examination is not a solution, but an entry into the uncomfortable reality of our own collective and shared weakness. Choosing awareness over avoidance means accepting that some social structures are designed to be hijacked by the most desperate among us. Staying with uncomfortable psychological truth is the only way to see the hooks buried in every display of strong social leadership. Join a space where unspoken patterns are examined honestly, without the need for a comforting or simple resolution for the group. The quiet takeover of a group is only one expression of how we manage our fear of being small or forgotten. Beneath the drive for social control lies an even more complex layer regarding how we value the attention of those we dislike. We often believe we stay in these groups out of loyalty, yet that loyalty is frequently a mask for a deep social fear. This leads us to a psychological idea that remains entirely unresolved. Do you hate the predator? Or do you envy their absolute certainty? There is a hidden connection between our need for a leader and our inability to hold our own psychological and moral center. Understanding this dynamic changes how you perceive every group chat, every family meeting, and every professional hierarchy in your modern life. Perhaps the most trapped person is not the one being controlled, but the one who has forgotten how to live without a master. What part of your own safety is built on the hope that the person in charge will never turn their eyes toward you?